I had so much fun making the top 10 undervalued DC keys, I thought I'd make another one. Although honestly, this list might be even more undervalued than that list I made. Specifically, I'm targeting books that you might actually find in dollar bins. These are the ultimate steals of deals for very surprising, notable DC keys and minor keys. Before we start with number one, guys, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. A lot of time goes into making these videos, so if you enjoy the comment, make sure to show your support and all that jazz. Number one, we got Captain Atom, issue number 12 from 1988. It's the first appearance of Major Force. You know Major Force, the dude that stuffed Kyle Rayner's girlfriend into a fridge. Bad guys don't get much more bad than this dude. Yeah, this guy's the real deal. Introduced in 1988, he's been a force to be reckoned with ever since. He's made some animated appearances, he's been a major player with DC Comics, and he's one of the villains that you know that if you see him, someone's probably gonna die. He's just one of those dudes that commands that presence. I actually could put multiple entries from this run on here. I did target this one in specifics. This run has a plethora of undervalued from a financial standpoint, but also underrated from an epic storytelling standpoint books. This notable villain appearance, though, seems to just squeak by people kind of unnoticed. Next up, we got another pretty big one here, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual 2. It's the first appearance of Sodom Yacht, who's prophesized to be the Ion, basically to be the Neo of the Green Lantern mythos, right? But possibly even more importantly, it prophesizes the Blackest Night, and it's written by Alan Moore. This book is a big deal. This is a 1986 Alan Moore story talking about what they'd eventually do in like 2009 or 2010 with Blackest Night, which is still considered to be the greatest Green Lantern run of all and one of the biggest DC storylines ever. I love books that have that sweet continuity that you find out that, oh, that was hinted at 25 years ago. That's crazy. One of the things I think that hurts this key is the title, Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual number 2. It's the second annual. It's Tales of the Green Lantern Corps. Definitely wasn't picked up that much, probably wasn't advertised too hard. And it's one that Green Lantern fans know probably quite well, but weirdly enough, just even DC fans don't even realize. Next up, we got Wonder Woman issue 105. This is the first appearance of Cassandra Sandsmark, later becoming Wonder Girl. I literally just found this in a dollar bin this past weekend. And frankly, whenever I see this book in the wild, you find it in dollar bins or even thrown in with collections. People love to collect all the early keys from this particular volume, and then they tend to forget about the stuff that happens after issue 100 until you start getting into those Adam Hughes covers. Well, there's some notoriety before that happens. Most importantly, this pretty big DC character of Wonder Girl. Another one that seems to slip by a lot of people. I would say maybe the cover isn't memorable, but my fine-tuned mint hunting eyes definitely recognize it, so I'm not quite sure why this one gets so unnoticed, but that is horribly undervalued. You can find it in $1 and 50-cent bins. Next up, we've got the first appearance of Plastique from Firestorm the Nuclear Man, issue number 7. This is from 1982. So it's a little bit earlier on, but even so, that doesn't stop you from finding this in dollar bins. My local comic book shop had a 50-cent sale. This and many other Firestorm books were in there, and I nabbed it up for a nice little 50 cents. And it was particularly high grade. Plastique literally was just in the Harley Quinn animated show. She's been on other animated versions. It's been a notable character since 1982. And while it does get considered more of a minor villain rather than a major player, can't quite justify a dollar price for a high grade for this. I think it's just another one that people just frankly don't know. Although, she is on the cover. So in addition to being a good key, it's a good cover/key mashup. Good bang for your buck on that one. Speaking of animated, we got a little bit of that going on here. We got Batman Adventures. This is volume 2 now we're talking. Issue number 14. It's the first full appearance of the Gray Ghost. Remember in the TV show Gray Ghost, played by Adam West. Problem is everybody puts all their chips into Batman Adventures, the first volume. Obvious reasons, people always collect Batman Adventures 12. People collect Batman and Robin Adventures that came right after. And some people collect Gotham Adventures. I think that's what it's called. Sorry, I kind of forget off the top of my head. So this is like the 4th run around. Going back to the original title of Batman Adventures, Volume 2, a lot of these books weren't ordered by retailers very much. This particular run is rarer to find, I would tend to notice. I find that this run is much less frequently found by myself in the wild, but despite its rarity, despite the fact that it really only pops up on eBay once in a while, the raws tend to go for right around that $1, sometimes $2, maybe $3 price tag. It's just another one that people don't know. Also has an awesome cover, but apparently that's still not enough to get people's knowledge on this one. Next up we have Green Lantern, Ganthett's Tale. It's a one-shot from 1992. You know those Guardians of Oa, the little dudes? This is Ganthet, the most popular, the most well-known of all the Guardians. He's the one with the more human-like ideology and the most relatable out of all the Guardians. He's often the one that sees things a little bit more clearly. This was a thicker spine one-shot. I've got my copy in the 9.8 because I collect Green Lantern. One thing of note, I will say CGC, I did ask them to make mention that it's Ganthet's first appearance, and they still brought the book back to me. It's blank, so maybe one of the reasons this book isn't well known is that CGC doesn't show that it's Ganthet's first appearance. You find this in the dollar bin all the time. I've got a couple comic book shops that I circulate within like a 30-40 mile radius from where I live. I see this book all the time. I pick it up every time too. It's a good one. Not only was it an epic story, big scale, really important stuff going on that would impact the future of all Green Lantern comics and is frankly a must-have for Green Lantern collectors, it is what I would consider a very notable first appearance. I do not even consider this to be a small key. I would actually consider it to be a rather larger Green Lantern key, but it can't escape that 50-cent to $1 price tag. Next up is the first appearance of Harold Allnut. Remember Batman's engineer, that mute dude with the hump on his back, really short guy that used to hang out in Batman's Bat Cave and work on all his stuff? His appearance was not in Batman books, interestingly. Actually, it was in the Question issue 33. I know why this book doesn't get the attention it deserves. Not only do graded copies not include the fact that it's the first mention of Harold Allnut, keycollector.com actually still doesn't show that this is the first appearance of Harold Allnut. A lot of people put a lot of their chips into keycollector.com, but it can't get all of them, and this is definitely one of them. He's a bona fide member of the Bat family and a massive importance to the 90s Batman arcs. He had an odd, somewhat gruesome fate in the 2000s, which was a shame. But this dude is awesome, and honestly, this issue that he first appears in is really good, and he's very prominently in the story. Next up, we got a really underrated, unknown, and undervalued one, Batman Shadow of the Bat, issue 3. This is from 1992. It is the first appearance of Amygdala, or Amygdala. Frankly, I don't know how to pronounce it, so I apologize. But this is the character that Bane in Batman and Robin, the movie, is based on. Well, either that or a mashup of him and Solomon Grundy. Amygdala is one of the beefiest, buffest Batman villains out there, right up with Bane and Solomon Grundy. He has several notable cover appearances and has been a smaller time but big player in Batman villains for a while now. He's still in the comics to today. You still find him whenever they need a token big bad to go up against Batman. That's where you'll find him. Everybody collects Shadow of the Bat issue number 1 because it's the first appearance of Victor Zsasz. But they don't realize if you go just a couple issues further, you've got a dollar bin, maybe a 50-cent bin book that if you can get in high grade, try sending it off. You might have like a $100 slab of a smaller, but notable Batman villain. I got my copy, and CGC actually does notate that it is the first appearance of Amygdala, whatever. Superman Adventures number 1. Just like Batman Adventures, you had Superman Adventures, which was the comic book equivalent to the TV show. This was your first appearance of Mercy Graves in comic books. You know Mercy Graves, the right-hand woman to Lex Luthor. Badass character. Anyone who saw Superman in the 90s knows exactly who I'm talking about. Well, this is the first comic book appearance, and it does happen to be in issue number 1. We've talked about before on this channel how immediately issue number 1s of even kind of left alone runs are still oftentimes the book you want to pick up. This just happens to also be a first appearance here. So why do I find this in dollar bins? I truly do not know. When I went to Florida recently, I went to a flea market down there and I was able to pick it up for $1 as well. Superman books in general have lost a lot of traction, unfortunately, but there's a lot of really great keys out there that are so affordable. Next up, I'm giving you a two-way tie. It's the most recent entry on this list, and it's Aquaman number 1 and Aquaman 17 from the 2011 Jeff Johns run. Now, the Jeff Johns run completely revitalized Aquaman, just like Jeff Johns often does. His Flash run was amazing. His Green Lantern run is comic books at their best. This is just what Jeff Johns does. He gives characters new life in a much bigger world. In issue number 1, he introduced a long-lost tribe called the Trench. Now, the Trench actually made its way into the Aquaman movie, which was inspired like 90% from the Jeff Johns recent run. In issue 17, we get our first cameo of the Dead King. Now, I looked at a few lists of best Aquaman villains of all time, and a lot of people put not only the Dead King, but the Trench in the top 5, oftentimes even in the top 3. That's right, these modern Jeff Johns created villains have been put up there with the likes of King Orm and Black Manta. Just goes to show you DC's quite capable of churning out some epic new characters still to this day. I too agree, these are some of the best Aquaman villains out there, and they're hardly even 10 years old. Maybe it's because the books are so recent it gets overlooked, or maybe it's because it's Aquaman, a character that's overlooked in general. Unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, these books always wind up in the dollar bin section. Might want to pick them up next time you see them. Let's give you a couple honorary mentions before I give you my number 1. Green Lantern Corps Quarterly, issue number 6, the first appearance of Lara Amoto. Firestorm the Nuclear Man, issue 24, the first appearance of the Blue Devil. Batman issue 77, The Death of Alfred. Batman Confidential 26, the first comic book appearance of King Tut. And Wonder Woman 19 from 1988, the first full appearance and story introducing the new Cersei. Alright, you guys ready for my number 1? It's a big one, and it has no business being in those 50-cent and dollar bins. You've probably picked this book up several times just not knowing what it was. Detective Comics $5.99 from 1989. It's the first appearance of Henry Ducard, the mentor, the main man that mentored Batman and taught him how to become a manhunter and a detective in his early formative years. Massive Batman formative character in the Batman mythos. He's been appearing a lot recently in comics. He was in Batman Begins, even though it led to a twist that I won't say here, but if you haven't seen that movie, you're close to being 2 decades late. Here is a book that I will always pick up whenever I see it. Even if I see it for like $2 to $3, I think this book has no business being in the single digits at all, especially for the really high grade. I find this in dollar bins. That same 50-cent bin sale I mentioned, this is another one I grabbed from there. First Henry Ducard, that's a big one. The only reason I can think is there's just a lack of knowledge about this particular key. Maybe people only really started noticing it in recent years. Truly a surprising one to me. Like many on this list, I cannot understand that one at all. This was a blast to make. Now, I'll tell you something, I probably got another 50 to 100 of these suckers in all up here. If you want, I could do another video of these. I could maybe do a dollar bin special Marvel video. That would absolutely be much harder to make. The word's out on most Marvel books by this point in time, but DC books for sure, there is hundreds of books that is just still so untapped. And I'm not even talking about the minor of the minor characters, but even more notable ones like this, that mid-level. Sometimes, like Henry Ducard, even a big player can just be overlooked. As always, guys, keep on hunting.